So I want to thank Carol Price and Creating Healthy Communities for inviting me to present tonight. And I also want to thank all of you for coming tonight and giving me your attention. I'm really excited to share some of the ideas and experiences I've gained from working with a number of community gardens, urban farms, and other environmental groups in Cleveland. I've done most of my work through a group called Green Triangle, as was mentioned. We're kind of a really fairly unique organization. We're a group of 12 designers who come together and share our sort of passion for permaculture. I will attempt to make a quick definition of permaculture later in my presentation. But if you find at the end that you're interested in learning more, I have a sign-up sheet over there. We do a lot of workshops, and as was mentioned, we do something called a permaculture design certification course. It's usually the introduction folks get to permaculture. It's a 12-day course, very intensive. We've started doing them over several weekends. So to begin, I can go back. Oh, I gave you the. Can I get a show of hands? How many here grow food in some way? It could be on a windowsill or. Oh, okay, great, great. How many are you involved in community gardens? Okay, about a third. Great. So I'll ask a simple question, which I've already primed you with by skipping ahead. But why do folks garden? Simple question. Does anyone want to offer why they garden?
Because they enjoy it.
Yeah, it's enjoyable.
Food safety.
Food safety, sure. Okay. Exercise? Yeah. What's that?
Relaxation.
Relaxation? Okay.
Economics.
Economics, sure. Okay, sure. Yeah. So this was just a short list that I came up really quickly. So most of you have already mentioned it. We do it for health reasons. I know I do it because I really like the sense of satisfaction from, being providing for myself and being responsible for my own needs. I think taste is also another reason a lot of people garden. Food you grow in your garden is a lot better than what you find in the store. And I actually think taste and health go hand in hand. I think we actually have one of the most sensitive instruments for determining how nutritious food is. I don't think all of us really are, have practice at that, but you can't tell me that styrofoam tomato you get in the grocery store is as nutritious as the one that comes out of the garden. It's a learning process. I think, there isn't a time where you don't learn something from the garden. I think for a lot of people it's expressive. I've gone through community gardens and you can almost tell the person's personality by the way their garden looks. Some are wild and crazy and some are like super neat and orderly. And I think it's also social. We put in a garden at my parents' house. We had neighbors that we'd rarely even talk to, who now were coming over, and we had common things to share. So I just came up with this list because I think gardening is oftentimes seen as kind of a hobby, or maybe it's a kind of humble necessity. But I think the fact that you all being here today is kind of testament to a little bit of a shift in perception about gardening. And there's sort of a growing awareness that it has really a lot of transformative power, not only for ourselves, but also for our communities. And that's certainly what's being kind of suggested by the title of the summit is Raising Richland, that community gardening can raise a region up to a new level. And I think it also suggests that the region needs raising up. But like Cleveland, I know this area and other Rust Belt cities face a lot of challenges. And I think there's certainly a lot of things we can do to address those challenges, but I personally get satisfaction out of the idea that something kind of as simple as gardening can have such a powerful impact in communities. So I've mentioned permaculture, and we go back and forth a lot of times on whether even we like to refer to the word, because it's probably unfamiliar to most people. Some people view it as, oh, here's another trendy buzzword that people throw around to impress you. And I certainly can relate to that, but it's what we do. And so in that kind of light, I'll share with you one of my favorite quotes from the originator of the concept of permaculture, an Australian named Bill Mollison. He said, though the problems of the world are increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And for me, I think food is one of those really simple solutions to a lot of the problems we face. And so, one of my favorite sayings is, the problem is the solution. There's this kind of way in which we get used to thinking of problems as if they're inevitable. And so this is kind of a way to like turn it on its head and say, well, maybe it's not. Maybe there's actually opportunity in things that we consider to be problems. So for example, if the problem is, you know, in reality, the food that is easily available to people is making us sick, you know, and everyone kind of knows about these statistics of, you know, all these degenerative diseases skyrocketing, and on the other hand, the way we grow our food is incredibly destructive to our environment. So, you know, a simple solution would be, well, let's change how we grow our food, and let's make it easier to get good food. Seems simple, but you know, you think of how many resources are spent in treating instead of preventing diseases, and how much money is spent propping up failing agricultural land with lots of chemical inputs and that sort of thing. So it's easy to say, but when you look at how most solutions are being applied, it doesn't really make any sense. So if we kind of chart the idea of the problem being the solution with food, we think of healthy food. It's kind of like a really fundamental thing food is to us, obviously. So if we chart the effects of food, oh, great, nice. Sorry, yeah. No, it's okay. So if healthy food is the answer, what are some of the other effects if we do grow healthy food? So a lot of you are gardeners. What does it take to get healthy food?
Good seed.
Good seed, okay. Soil, right. Sweat, okay. I did hear someone say soil. That's where I'm going with it. So, you know, every gardener knows we need good soil. You know, a lot of the work that I do is in teaching folks how to build good soil. And oftentimes, especially in urban areas, a lot of the soil is crap. You know, used to have an old building there, and who knows what else is in the soil. So that's a lot of the ends up being the work that we do. We're sort of a new picture is emerging that soil isn't this like inert substance. It's actually like teeming with all kinds of these microscopic critters, I call them. All this soil biology ends up being incredibly important. I liken it to this biology is actually the stomach of plants. You know, it's in the soil, it's near the roots. It actually is responsible for plants attaining their full health potential. Has anyone heard of probiotics? Right? Okay. So the idea is that you eat yogurt and it helps your intestinal flora, and so it makes you healthier, it makes you digest better. Well, the same is true with soil. So in order to get good food, we have to restore this healthy ecosystem that's in the soil. So just merely by growing good food, we're also restoring some of the natural environment. What does good soil look like? Anyone tell me? Black, right? My dad calls it black gold, right? Well, that black is carbon, and so building good soil actually captures, and if you do it right, stores carbon in the soil for hundreds of years. So right there, now we have a solution to this climate problem we have with the carbon dioxide atmosphere. So if we changed our agricultural policies, we could virtually eliminate the carbon dioxide problem. So here we go. We're all of a sudden the problem's now becoming the solution if we just grow good food. There's another thing gardeners know is fresh food, or good food is fresh food, right? Good food isn't food shipped in from California. So fresh food is local food. And local food doesn't have the same need for trucks, it doesn't have the same need for packaging and refrigeration and all the associated pollution with those technologies. So buying local food means that money that used to go to sort of placeless suppliers, who knows where it goes when you shop at the grocery store. If you spend it on a local grower, all that money goes in the grower's pocket. And then they actually tend to spend the money locally too, so now all of a sudden you get this cycling effect of the money staying within the community. And in fact, a recent study was done in Northeast Ohio, I think a 16 county region, showed that if the region made a shift towards buying just 25%, just a quarter of all the food used in that Northeast Ohio area, if only a quarter of it was bought locally, it would put $4.2 billion back into the local economy. So this is a huge opportunity we have in this kind of this shift where I think a lot of people are sort of realizing about this importance of what foods could be in our communities. And then obviously, good food restores our health, and then we tend to appreciate good food more, so we'll then demand that our food be grown and healthy in productive soil, etc. So it is this kind of like resonating effect that food can really have on communities. And what I do in permaculture design, we call this stacking functions. It's the idea that each solution that we implement should have more than one outcome. And then it's our role as designer to make the connections between these outcomes. So we know we need good soil, we know we need local growers, we know we need to support the local economy through the food. So as designers, we can start to try to link these things together. So the awareness of this kind of transformative power of food is really rapidly growing. Some are calling it the good food revolution. Are people aware of Growing Power in Milwaukee? Is anyone? Doing some really, really great stuff there. And there's actually a satellite organization in Cleveland called Red All Green Partnership, and they're doing this closed-loop aquaponics, so they're growing fish in the bottom of these tanks and then pumping the water up from the fish up to the top and growing tomatoes and whatever through that system. It's really pretty impressive. So this kind of rapid growth of this kind of food revolution is really just taken off in Cleveland. Farmers markets have sprung up all over the city. We have several of them now that are open year-round. There's now restaurants that advertise that they are local food restaurants and that they source from local foods. There's even a growing number of people who consider themselves urban farmers. They support themselves from the food they grow. This is one in the west side of Cleveland, Ohio City. We did a consultation with them to deal with some of that rainwater runoff because it goes right downhill into the Cuyahoga River right there. So this is really pretty impressive. I mean, even 6 or 7 years ago, you said, "Oh, an urban farmer in Cleveland." Urban farmer. Now it's like, the new hot thing. So numerous. Schools are now starting to put food into their curriculum. They're bringing back school gardens. Does anyone remember those? I mean, they got rid of a lot of them, and now they're like, well, those were a good idea. We do a program through a partner, City Rising Farm, where we go to libraries Saturday of every month, and for a lot of kids, libraries are second homes, and so we teach them about growing good food through making crafts, and then we also serve them soup, healthy, locally sourced soup, and a lot of times it's food they've never had before. So there's really this kind of really interesting what food can kind of connect into a lot of different things that people do. We also have now recently opened the largest hydroponic greenhouse located in the city. This is a 3-acre complex. And it's actually worker-owned and operated, and it's in one of Cleveland's poorest neighborhoods. This thing like sprang up overnight. I was driving down the street. What the heck is? I mean, it's like 3 acres of greenhouses. It's awesome. And last but not least, there's been an explosion of community gardens in almost every neighborhood. And community gardens are near and dear to my heart because I consider this is where this sort of good food revolution has really started. They were sort of at the forefront of this idea of like, let's grow food in the city. And I think they're incredibly important for new gardeners who either don't have access to land or just can't put one in their yard. And we really need new gardeners. So I'm really glad to see that all of you are here with your interest in gardening. Because new gardeners are more likely, actually even though they grow their own food, they're more likely to shop at farmers markets because they know what good food is, right? So they're like, well, where do I get more good food? Well, the farmers market. They also tend to have more appreciation for the natural environment, and so they'll support more regenerative farming practices. And I think community gardens that have also been at the forefront of reimagining what it means to live in a city. I think our modern lifestyle has kind of tended to fragment our communities to a point where neighborhoods are kind of like a little more than, well, this is where my house is. You know, the fact is many communities don't have even space for people just to get together. No reason for neighbors to interact with each other, no room to have discussions or solve problems. And I think having this community space is incredibly important for us psychologically. It allows us to connect our lives with a sense of place, to an actual physical reality as it relates to the wider world we live in. So many of these community projects have emerged on vacant land. This is an example. This is like, I think, 12 vacant properties that they put together, and they're slowly growing a community garden, community center out of this an East Side neighborhood in Cleveland. A lot of this sort of burgeoning activities brought me to Cleveland, and it seemed to me like the stuff that I do with permaculture had a lot to offer, this sort of growing movement around community gardening. So, what is permaculture? I don't have time to go in real in-depth, but it's a design approach. It's a way of designing human landscapes that have the resiliency of natural systems. It originated as the contraction of the words permanent in agriculture. So, real quick, if you compare a mature forest to our agricultural land, there's a drastic difference, right? No one waters the forest. You don't see anyone backing trucks up with bags of fertilizer in the forest. But yet it's incredibly productive. So, the originators of permaculture were saying, well, why can't we farm this way? Why can't we grow our food this way? And so what permaculture design does is it mimics how natural systems works. It was developed in Australia in the 60s, and it since is now really becoming a global movement. And it's starting to concern itself with how we design our buildings, how we design our communities, and so now has become a contraction of permanent in culture. So the key aspect that makes permaculture useful in creating a successful community garden is that it's a design approach, right? We think things through before we get started. I've seen a lot of community gardens that just, it's great, they have a great zeal, they want to jump in there and get things done, but then they realize later on they run up against all these difficulties that they hadn't considered and hadn't thought it through. So a lot of it's just really just, well, let's hold on, let's think things through a little bit, let's give it a little forethought. It also looks at things site-specifically. So we have a tendency to like, we want to do this thing and we're going to do it, whether that plot of land actually is going to let us do that or not. So we let the site that we're working with tell us, to some extent, what it wants us to do. You know, we try to match what we want with what the site is going to allow us to do in a certain way. So, you know, I have kind of obsession with these French dessert melons. I don't know if anyone else has. They're awesome. And I tried to grow them in this one garden, and the soil was just crap. It was just like, well, if I would have planted berry bushes there or something, that would have worked, right? So, you know, another thing great about gardening, it can be very humbling. So we don't look at anything in terms of single products. We recall the stacking functions thing. We want things to have multiple outcomes. So, kind of a brief introduction. I'll jump into what might be a permaculture take on community garden. So one concept we know is that successful gardens are gardens that people live in. If your garden is tucked away out of sight and you don't see it, you don't have a chance to interact with it, you don't notice when all the plants are looking droopy, I should water it, right? Gardens that we live in, that we can see from our favorite sitting spot, those are going to be the ones that are going to be most successful. So a lot of times, I've seen community gardens that really focus really heavily on maximizing growing area. You know, the whole thing is garden beds. And there's no area for people to get together. I mean, it's a community garden. We got to have space for people to, you know, to sit and talk and visit with each other. So one solution we implemented at City Rising Farm was we built this earth oven. Made of simple materials. It's sand, clay, straw, and stone. And you light a fire in it, you let it get hot, and then you can bake breads and pizza and that sort of thing in it. So we built this for next to nothing. I mean, we found the rocks laying around the property, and the clay we could have dug right out of the ground. Sand, we bought a couple bags of sand and some straw, and it's a very interactive process. It's, you know, you shape it with your hands. The kids like went crazy when we built this thing. They loved it. And it immediately became a focal point for this garden. And the organizer of the garden later said that she had more neighbors come and visit, wondering, heck is that thing? And then the conversation got started, and then all of a sudden, oh, okay, maybe I want to plot here. Whereas before, when it was just a garden, they weren't really interested. It seemed like a lot more was going on over here. And so by making an oven that, you know, cooks pizzas and bread, we can further those interactions of connecting, you know, good food with some simple acts of cooking. And we're working now to expand this idea and create simple outdoor kitchens for gardens. So we can have the bread oven, grill space, maybe a space to wash the dishes, you know, so that we can create more of these interactions. Food is a social act, gardening is a social act. Let's bring them together. This is just an basic idea of like, just do simple little maps of your garden. Figure out, okay, where's the compost pile going to be? You know, where's the truck going to be able to come in and drop off a load of wood chips? Now this is this idea of we design things out. I've been in gardens where I had to like climb over a wood pile to get to my bed and drag like 100 feet of hose to my garden plot. And it was just like, you know, like if you don't make it easy, you know, people aren't going to come back. So if you plan things out a little bit, it'll be a lot more successful. And of course, this works for gardens, private gardens. All this stuff is not just about community gardens. Another thing I've observed with community gardens is that you'll get a lot of support early on. Neighbors really want to be like, oh, cool, you're doing something in the neighborhood. We'll sign up for a plot. And then summer comes, where are they, right? They're, you know, weeds this high. So you don't have to just have vegetable gardens. You can do other types of things. So, you know, one thing community gardens did in the west side of Cleveland is community orchards, right? So a lot of those perennial plantings, a lot of effort up front. You got the people who are excited at that time, get them digging holes and putting stuff in the ground, and then they only have to come back maybe a couple times to water them or to prune them. So we're matching, again, we're matching what's actually there with what the garden can be, right? People aren't gung-ho about vegetable gardening. Give them something else to do. You know, there's other ways that people can get interact with community gardens. Another strategy, you can take this a step further. This is a little bit more technical, but this is that idea of why can't we farm like the forest? So this idea is called forest gardening, where we actually mimic how forests are structured. We're hoping to put one of these in Cleveland this year. And the idea is that, so what happens to your vegetable gardens or your lawns if you walk away and you don't do anything anymore? It's wild, it's overgrown, right? Then what happens? Say a squirrel comes in, plants an acorn, right? Now you got a tree. So eventually all of our lawns and gardens want to be a forest. That's what gardeners do all the time, is they're keeping the forest back, you know? So forest gardening, the idea is, why not we set a sail and follow that process the way it wants to go and shape it so that we're planting fruit trees, we're planting fruiting shrubs, we're having ground covers that can be things we use for teas and that sort of thing. So this is kind of a busy slide, but you know, you got your 7 layers and that sort of thing. So, and then at the end, in 10 years, 20 years, you got a fully functioning forest system with very little maintenance, and you can be just pulling food off of it. You know, this would be, you know, this is a, this would be a great thing for, you know, if you do with kids, and then, you know, you start them out, plant a forest garden, and then in 10 years, you know, they got bushels of apples coming out, or, you know, whatever it is. There's a picture of a forest garden. This could also be a great strategy if your garden's shady, right? So there are shade-tolerant fruiting plants that you can use in conjunction with what your site already has. There's a giant tree shading most of this garden out. So this person's chose, looks like maybe currants are over here. This is another garden we did. We were approached by a block club. They had a plot of land that they wanted to see turned into a garden. We asked them some questions, and it turned out they were all were in community gardens already. And just up the street, they just planted a community orchard. So we're like, well, those two things are probably what we would have done. When we got to asking them, they did a lot of projects through their community center with kids dealing with crafts. So we said, why not plant a craft garden? You know, there's all these plants that we can use so we don't necessarily have to focus on food. So there's a flowering dogwood, the red branches. There's businesses that just sell these. You know, this could be a little micro enterprise for someone. You know, gourds are obviously broom corn, and that's some of our motley crew right there. So we can start to really think about different ways that we're using these garden spaces in the city. This is a farm that I participate in called Gather Round Farm. This is built on top of the parking lot. It's a raised bed on top of the parking lot. So it proves you can put gardens in anywhere. This is on a Lorraine, which is a main thoroughfare on the west side. And beautiful flowers, and it's literally like flowers are growing in like that much soil on top of the pavement. They have a water catching feature here where they dug out some of the asphalt and it accepts some of the rainwater runoff from the adjacent parking lot. So we can also solve in our gardens this huge stormwater runoff problem. Northeast Ohio, I think this is one of the first areas they're actually starting. You have to pay a fee per your permeable surface. So if you have roofs or parking lots, you now have to pay a fee given the stormwater runoff from it. So these gardens can be strategies that we deal with runoff problems. They're also one of the first gardens to have chickens, and they were actually instrumental in getting ordinances passed in Cleveland that you can keep bees and chickens in the city. So, you know, this kind of like, and now, you know, everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people have chickens now, so it's, you know, this sense of where this kind of good food revolution can go is really interesting. A side note, the water reminds me, if you're going to do one thing and you're going to spend money on it, let's get your water system down, because that's going to be the key to having a successful garden. Rain barrels are great. Actually, that City Rising farm that I mentioned earlier, they bought a cistern, right? A big plastic tank, and they fill it up from the fire hydrant. I don't know how it is here in Cleveland, but or in Mansfield, but you can get permits to use the fire hydrants. So they fill it up with water, so then anyone from the garden can then water their garden. You don't have to have, okay, where's the key at to the fire hydrant? You don't have to train your whole garden. So it's really smart to think through your water first, because that's going to be your main limiting factor in any garden. This is a project called Naturehood. It's another Green Triangle Partner project. We plant native plants on vacant lots. A lot of these are endangered plants, so we come in, we do a technique called sheet mulching, where we put cardboard out and compost and soil, and we kill off all the grass and weeds with the cardboard, and then we come in and plant native plants. And these are just like amazing gardens to see as you drive by, just like so much color. We did murals on the side of this garage. So, you know, you can really think of these spaces as being spaces for art too. This is a project one of our members did, creating these kind of like forts for people to gather in. So there's kind of interesting things happening on a lot of these vacant lands. So to end, and then I'll take some questions, I'll offer another quote from another permaculture figure. He says, "All the world's problems can be solved in the garden." So let's start right here in Ohio. Thank you.
You mentioned putting down cardboard. Is there any toxicity issues with that?
No, I wouldn't worry about it. Some people say take the tape off because you'll end up digging it up later. But my understanding is most newspaper and cardboard, they now use soy basings. Don't use the glossy stuff, would be my suggestion. We have a great source. We have a box manufacturer, so they'll give us all their end runs. We use that.
A lot of people see bicycling as another way to save energy.
Sure.
Are you doing anything, or is there any efforts to connect bicycling with gardening? Do you guys use gardens in Cleveland?
Sure. I actually work for a landscaping company, and we do a good part of it by bike. So we go out and do all of our maintenance runs. We have trailers where we bring all of our tools, and we come up, and it's in, a lot of them are small lots, so you don't need the big mowers. We can actually come in and get the job done before, you know, the guys even got their trucks off or their machines off the truck. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great.
So you're using a Dutch cargo bikes, or?
They're like a bent steel conduit, kind of low to the ground so they don't tip over. So yeah, I mean, there's people doing studies for urban farmers to use bikes to bring their produce to the farmers market. So yeah, that's another great project.
Do you have an email address?
I do. It is John, Jon, at greentry.org. And I do have a sign-up sheet over there, so if you want to hear about stuff we're doing.
I'm interested in the oven, how you make that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're actually, this year, we're focusing on natural building, which is that technique that we're using. So we're going to have workshops, straw bale, that sort of thing. So
okay. You said Green Try, T-R-Y?
T-R-I.
T-R-I.org.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you know where the funding came from for that big house?
Yes, that was Cleveland Foundation, our big foundation group. Yeah, that was a massive undertaking. I think the Cleveland Clinic, sort of the, I don't know what you want to call it, it's sort of the evil empire in Cleveland. They know it for the clinic, they do great medicine there, but they are like taking over the city. So there's a lot of money in it, for sure, but it is worker-owned. So it's a really neat operation.
The subject of chickens. Here in the city of Mansfield, you can only have chickens if your property is 5 acres or larger. Did you have to change city ordinance in Cleveland, or what happened with that?
Yeah, we did. Honestly, on a lot of this stuff, people get scared about ordinances. My suggestion is just get friendly with your neighbors, because that's probably who's going to tattle on you. Because in the Latino neighborhoods, people had chickens for 30, 40 years. This was not a new thing for them. We happened to get a councilman who realized where things were going and knew that this kind of food movement was the cool thing, and so we had his support to sponsor this legislation. So yeah, I mean, definitely the ordinance stuff is things we need to change, because that can be where you get a lot of friction.
Is composting a part of your community gardens? In other words, you're going to be doing the normal gardening and the composting?
Yeah, sure. Composting is usually something we always design into a garden. I think really the sky's the limit on that. 'Cause in the city, there's so much food waste. I mean, there's that satellite project that does the fish cycling. We have a food terminal in Cleveland, and they just bring in truckloads of food. I mean, it's so sad to see because a lot of it's just fine. And there's like people right next door that are going hungry. It's just like, oh God, what is going on here? But yeah, there's tons of food waste in the city, so that is a huge opportunity to compost and build your soil. So, yeah. Anyone else? Anyone have issues or some problems in the garden? I guess we could. Any challenges they faced in community garden? Sure.
I think it's called like hard spot disease or something like that. After a plant gets it, is there any way to save it?
Well, probably not. There is something that I do. It's called compost tea. It's kind of a new kind of idea. Is take compost, you put it in water, and you bubble air through it. And so basically, you take all the organisms that are in the compost and you grow it out into this water. Then you have, that's why it's called tea. You don't drink it. Your plants do. And then you spray that on the plants, and the idea is it's just like the idea of yogurt. It's good for your stomach. You're inoculating the leaves of your plants with this range of organisms, and so they block up all the spaces, and so it's harder for the disease to come in. But usually, plant diseases, and this is my take, is usually some kind of deficiency in the soil. So get your soil tested and see if you need to add any minerals to the soil. Because usually, if it's an unhealthy plant, it's because the soil isn't balanced correctly.
Is it possible for the disease to spread from other people's property, transfer the rest of the leaves that come off the trees and out the disease? And then when they get on the plant, it cause the other properties.
Yeah, I'm not certain on the life cycle of that particular disease, but sure, yeah, I mean, that could be a problem. I know it. I would say focus more on getting your soil healthy, and you'll have a lot less problems with diseases.
One quick question, I have a couple more minutes. I'm thinking at least from a volunteer-driven, community-based garden to more of a income-generating farm or et cetera. What do you think helps people? What?
The Holy Grail.
Holy Grail, right. What do you think helps people make that transition? How can we help support that transition to have someone's livelihood?
Sure. Some things that I hope to see in Cleveland soon. There's a really great example in Athens called AceNet. And basically, they're a collaborative kitchen, storage space, food processing facility. So usually the key in any farming is the value-added idea. Is that you make more money selling salsa than you do tomatoes. So that's a really great model that I think every city should have, is a place for small growers to go and be able to process their food, label it, put it in jars, and then sell it. So that would be a key way to make the sort of the value-added step. Another great, that's good enough. Yeah. AceNet, ACENET. I think actually there's a great poster, Central Roots. It's a great little store. They sort of bring together a lot of small farms and sell it at the store. So farmers markets can be a real burden on a lot of farmers because right in the middle of the growing season now you got to get up in the morning and pick all your stuff, and now you got to spend all day selling it, and you could be working on your farm.
Does Cleveland have any way of funding these kinds of transitions from amateur to professional gardening?
Yeah, there's grant opportunities. Not a
Are
lot.
there,
A lot
are
of
there
this.
lenders there?
I'm sorry.
Are there lenders there?
Not that I know of, but that would be awesome if there was some, called micro loans or whatever. A lot of it is really just people have a passion for it and, like living a little close. But yeah, I think that's the next step. We gotta take this and really build it up so that people can really make livelihoods out of it in a secure way. And we're not quite there yet, but it's getting there for sure.
You talked about local war, and unfortunately, those that live in northern Ohio, because they have a hydroponic farm nearby. How do we get fresh lettuce, or local lettuce, and local tomatoes, and local produce that we can't grow them, that we can take in the winter, and bring it near a hydroponic
Yeah, well,
plant?
they only sell to big suppliers, so we're not getting that lettuce. But it's a great question.
How do you encourage, I'd love to have fresh lettuce in the winter, but.
There's a USDA program where they're giving away high tunnels. I don't know if anyone's aware of this. Giving away high tunnels.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah. So a couple of our gardens that are, a hoop house, I'm sorry, a greenhouse, plastic greenhouse. I think it's the USDA. A few of our gardens we're building some this year, so that should be fun. So yeah, greenhouses are key. I think another big one would be actually community root cellars or collaborative root cellars, so that you can store your root vegetables and then sell them through the year. But yeah, I mean that's a big thing. Usually, at our farmers markets, the farmers who have the hoop houses and have the lettuce, I mean it's gone. You got to be there right when they open because they sell out of that right away. So food storage is really what we got to do, or season extension.
Getting back to the hydroponic greenhouse, what do they do with the spent fluids from the greenhouse?
I don't know much about that. Honestly, I think it's a really great project, but I think hydroponics is a huge energy investment in that thing. With all the lights and all those chemicals, I mean, I think they're doing really great work, but I don't know, hydroponic, I'm not a huge fan of, because I'm a soil guy, so I'm like, what's that all about? Yeah, I think you might have
Ontario.
And I think Jonathan will be available for a
Sure.
few moments if you'd like to come up and speak one-on-one. I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Jonathan,